Sophie Turner looked at her watch for the third time. The hands seemed to mock her, moving slowly as her coffee grew cold on the table. In that small cafe, the clatter of cups mingled with the soft sound of rain outside. She had dressed carefully, choosing her perfume as if betting her last chips on a blind date. But as the minutes passed, her hope began to melt like sugar at the bottom of the cup. There are moments in life when the silence of waiting says more than any words. Sophie looked around, trying to hide the embarrassment of someone who believes they have been forgotten. And who has never felt this way, waiting for something or someone that seemed like it would never come? Perhaps you've been there too, torn between doubt and pride, trying to decide whether to leave or give fate another minute. It's curious how time sometimes tests our patience before revealing its plans. It was at that moment that the unexpected happened. The cafe door opened and, instead of a man, 2 twin girls entered, identical even in the curious sparkle in their eyes. They held small umbrellas and wore the look of haste on their faces, like someone carrying out an important mission. One of them, with a firm and sweet voice, said, "Our father apologizes for the delay." And at that very second, Sophie realized that this blind date was about to take a turn she could never have imagined, one that her heart would understand before her mind. Ella and Chloe could barely reach the counter, but they had a charming confidence in their eyes. The twins approached Sophie with the naturalness of those who already understand that certain missions of the heart cannot wait. "Our father apologizes for being late," they repeated, their cheeks flushed with the knowledge that they were doing something important. It was as if life had sent 2 little ambassadors of destiny to mend what time seemed to have broken. Sophie leaned in, curious, and asked who their father was. The girls exchanged knowing glances, as if they were keeping a precious secret. They explained that he was stuck with a problem at work, but that he didn't know they had left home. And it wasn't rebellion. It was love. Love in the form of courage. And let's face it, sometimes the best love stories begin with small acts of innocence and darings, the kind that adults forget how to do. As they spoke, the atmosphere in the cafe seemed to change. The waiter paused for a moment to listen, and even the sound of the rain became softer, as if respecting this unlikely encounter. Sophie smiled, feeling something rare, the lightness of a moment that was unplanned but seemed necessary. Deep down, she didn't know it, but that childish gesture would be the first thread of a new family being woven, even before any words of love were spoken. The twins continued talking with the sincerity typical of children, the kind that breaks down any adult armor. They said that their father, Liam Hayes, was worried because he didn't want to seem inattentive on the blind date. He even drew a smiley face on the calendar so he wouldn't forget, Ella said proudly. Sophie chuckled softly. In that simple sentence, there was a portrait of someone who still believed in love, even after having lost so much. As the girls talked, Sophie noticed something beautiful. The way their affection for their father overflowed in every word. It was like watching a silent movie about family, where gestures say it all. They said that their father always comes home late, covered in dust and tired, but still finds time to make pancakes or braid their hair before school. A single father who, without even realizing it, had been building a castle of love inside his home, brick by brick. Listening to this, Sophie felt something stir inside her. Perhaps empathy, perhaps admiration. The man she was waiting for was not just a name on an app or a face in a photo. He was a real person, with scars, responsibilities, and a heart that was still looking for a second chance. And curiously, while the girls talked about their father, fate began to write the first line of a story that, deep down, seemed to have been written a long time ago. The twins' words began to change tone. Chloe, the quieter one, lowered her eyes and said that their mother had passed away 2 years ago. The love story between Liam and his wife seemed to have been abruptly interrupted, leaving silence to fill the spaces that were once filled with laughter. Sophie felt the air grow heavy. It was easy to understand now why this single father was hesitant to give his heart another chance. Grief sometimes takes longer to pass than time itself. Ella continued with a steady gaze and an almost adult pride, saying that her father had learned everything on his own, from tying hair ribbons to cooking pasta on nights when he missed his wife. Sophie was moved. It wasn't about perfection, it was about presence. And how many people out there forget that love is also shown in the little things? That family is more a verb than a noun. It's caring, insisting, continuing, even when your heart hurts. As she watched the girls, Sophie realized that this late encounter wasn't just about her and Liam. It was about rebuilding, about the kind of courage that is born after loss. Sometimes, fate chooses simple places, like a coffee shop, to mend broken hearts. And at that moment, Sophie began to wonder, what if that meeting was more than coincidence? What if somehow, love was just waiting for the right moment to return? Between laughs, the twins let slip something that made Sophie hold her breath. "We just want to see Daddy happy again," said Chloe, absent-mindedly fiddling with her napkin. It was simple, but profound. 2 children wishing for a second chance, not for themselves, but for the father they loved. There was a purity in that request that reminded her of what most adults forget, that love, when it is true, wants to see the other person smile, even if the world has been cruel before. Sophie realized that this single father didn't need pity, but company. Someone who could see beyond the dark circles under his eyes, his responsibilities, and the walls he had built around himself out of pain. And it was at that moment that she had a bold idea. If he couldn't leave work, then fate would have to find a way to bring the date to him. She grabbed her cell phone, called a taxi, and asked the girl's nanny for help. If love doesn't come to the coffee shop might as well go to love. As she put the dinner boxes in the bag, Sophie felt a chill in her stomach. It was unlike anything she had ever done before. It wasn't just a romantic gesture, it was a leap of faith, a gesture from someone who understands that love stories are not born out of comfort, but out of action. And maybe, just maybe, that impulse was exactly what the universe was waiting for, to rewrite the lives of 4 people. After all, when the heart decides to act, even chance organizes itself to help. Night was falling when the car stopped in front of the construction site gate. The wind carried the smell of cement and rain, and the twins held on tightly to their dinner, as if they were carrying treasure. Sophie took a deep breath before going inside. In the distance, she saw Liam Hayes wearing a helmet, covered in dust, giving instructions to the workers. He looked exhausted, oblivious to the surprise that fate had in store for him. A late encounter that would change everything. When he turned and saw his daughters running toward him, his tired eyes lit up. "Girls!" "What are you doing here?" he asked, surprised. And then Sophie appeared, a little embarrassed, holding the improvised dinner from the cafeteria. The silence that followed was sweet, the kind of silence that speaks 1,000 words. Liam, still confused, laughed. "You brought dinner? To the construction site?" he said with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. They ate sitting on a pile of boards, sharing laughter, stories, and a piece of normality. The dust became a backdrop for affection, and the noise of the machines was replaced by the sound of children's laughter. It was simple but true. Sometimes love begins just like that, out of time, out of place, but at the right time. And that night, between headlights and cold pancakes, Sophie realized that fate had a special talent for turning the unlikely into the essential. A few days later, the invitation came in a simple, almost shy way. The girls insisted, "Will you come have breakfast with us?" Liam's message said. Sophie smiled. And so, one Saturday morning, she showed up at her single father's house, where the smell of pancakes mingled with the sound of giggles coming from the kitchen. It was a common scene. But for someone who had learned to live in silence, that family noise sounded like music. Hazel, the nanny, greeted her with a knowing smile. Ella and Chloe were already arguing over who would show her the room first, and Sophie, amid laughter, felt a part of something she hadn't expected to find. She helped tie a ribbon in Chloe's hair, while Liam watched from afar, with that kind of look that mixes admiration and fear of allowing himself to feel again. That simple moment, the smell of coffee, the sound of the frying pan, seemed to sew together what fate had begun in the cafe. Sophie noticed the details. Drawings stuck to the refrigerator, an old photo with a broken frame, a childish note stuck to the mirror saying, "We love you, Daddy." They were reminders of a love story that still echoed, but now had a new melody. And as the girls' laughter filled the room, Sophie began to understand. Maybe love isn't about starting over, but about continuing, even with the scars. And without realizing it, the next step was about to happen on the balcony. On the porch, the late afternoon brought a comfortable silence. The smell of coffee still lingered in the air, and the sun gilded the face of Liam Hayes, who watched the twins playing in the yard. He took a deep breath before speaking, as if seeking courage between words. He told Sophie that since his wife's death he had avoided anything that reminded him of love. "It's easier to take care of walls than hearts," he said, looking at the horizon. And Sophie understood. There was no coldness there. There was fear. She replied calmly, saying that she had also had her heart broken. She said that fear is sometimes just a reminder that something matters. That feeling afraid to love is a sign that love is still alive, just waiting for the right moment to blossom. Liam listened to her in silence, and a shy smile appeared, almost as if he were allowing himself to breathe again. It was as if that late encounter had dusted off his memories and restored the sparkle to his eyes. The conversation flowed easily, between confidences, laughter, and long glances. Time seemed to slow down, and for the first time, there was no rush, just presence. That moment was not the end of the pain, but the beginning of healing. And as Sophie watched the twins running across the lawn, she thought that perhaps fate did not bring people together to fill voids, but to create new meanings. And there, in the midst of the ordinary, something extraordinary was beginning to be born. 3 months had passed since that coffee date, and curiously, everything seemed simpler now. Sophie and Liam no longer needed excuses to see each other. Fate had created 1,000 ways to bring them together. The twins were thrilled with each visit, as if they were watching their own love story come to life. The man who had once hidden behind his work now smiled easily, and Sophie discovered day by day that love does not require perfection, only presence and truth. It was in the same cafe where it all began that Liam knelt down, nervous, his hands shaking more than the first time he saw her. The sound of cups, the smell of coffee, and the reflection of the lights created a familiar, almost poetic setting. "You brought laughter back to my home and to my soul," he said. "And in front of everyone," he proposed. Sophie's tears mingled with the laughter of the girls, who clapped their hands like little witnesses to the new beginning. That moment was not just a yes. It was confirmation that time may delay, but love is not lost. The blind date that began with silence and waiting now ended with promises and eternity. And somehow Sophie knew. What seemed unlikely became inevitable. What seemed too late arrived at just the right moment. And as her heart said yes, the universe silently smiled along with her. A year later, the garden at Liam's house was blooming like never before. The twins ran across the lawn dressed in white, holding small baskets of petals. Sophie watched everything with a light heart. Who would have thought that blind date in a rainy cafe would become the beginning of a family? The sun shone as if the sky itself blessed that day. And to the sound of laughter and promises, she walked to the altar set up in the backyard, surrounded by the people that fate had brought together. The girls, now bridesmaids, left a single white rose at the foot of a photo of their mother, silently and tenderly. It was a small gesture, but one full of meaning. A reminder that love does not replace, it expands. Liam wiped away his tears, and Sophie held his hand. They knew. This love story did not erase the past, but wrote a new chapter about healing, faith, and new beginnings. When the narrator ended with the phrase, "Sometimes love arrives 17 minutes late, but it's the right time," everyone smiled. Because time, after all, has its mysteries. It delays encounters, but advances purposes. It separates to later unite in a more beautiful way. And perhaps that is the secret. True love never arrives too early. It arrives when we are ready to receive it.